Welcome to the graveyard. I'm Violet Hummingbird, and today is day 16 of Spooky October, where every evening for the month of October I read you a true ghost story. And I'm actually discovering these stories with you as I read them because I just sort of skimmed them to choose them for the month, and we'll be discovering it together. So if you don't want to miss another spooky story, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so I can see you every evening. And today's story is by John. Bachelor Grove Cemetery is known by many ghost research societies and casual ghost hunters alike as being the most haunted cemetery in the United States. I'd heard all of the tales, ranging from ghost cars seen on the Midlothian Turnpike and two-headed ghost that appears out of the murky pond near the site to the man who comes dashing across the pathway that leads to the graveyard, only to disappear moments later. And who could forget the woman who cuts off the heads of men unfortunate enough to be at the place at night? I had been to the haunted graveyard dozens of times and had never come across any physical or auditory proof of a ghost. I'd taken roll after roll of film and videotape without anything appearing on them. My beliefs were beginning to wear thin, and I assumed now that most of the tales were in fact only tales. My mind, however, was changed on a winter day in 2001. It was an average weekend for my nephew Mike and me. The weather was cold and rainy, and we figured it was the best time to hit haunted places. No one else would be around. We got together our film, videotape gear, and other necessities. This time I decided to try something different. I brought along a Ouija board and planned on testing it out. We arrived at the cemetery around noon and began our investigation. The place had remained relatively unchanged from the last time I'd seen it. Beer bottles had been strewn along the path to the place amidst other rubbish, and it had the obvious look of neglect. We made our rounds about the cemetery, flashing pictures, shooting videotape as we saw fit. I had the general feeling of discomfort I had whenever I entered the place. The badly damaged tombstones, ripped from their proper places, had been placed as seats for inconsiderate party animals. Some sites had been partially vandalized, such as the fence around the graveyard, which was torn and cut open in places. I felt like we were intruding on this place, disturbing the peace. This feeling never went away. I was used to this, however, and we proceeded with our business. The initial videotaping of the cemetery and surrounding areas lasted 2 hours or so. By then we were cold and wet. A shadow had hung in the sky all day. It was then that I decided to try the Ouija board. I tried to contact spirits at various tombstones throughout the area, and I always came up with gibberish, as if too many things were trying to communicate at once. After an hour of this, we decided to call it quits and head home for a while. We started the long journey home and got a bite to eat. Our plans were to return to the site at around 2 in the morning. We got back to the place at about 2:30 a.m. Walking down the path with only our flashlights to cut through the darkness, I could feel a great tension in the place. It was no different than usual, but I still felt on somewhat a greater edge. Fog had settled on the cemetery in sheets. As soon as we entered the graveyard, our troubles began. We got through the gate. A lone deer that had been grazing inside bolted upon seeing us. This gave us a big scare, something we laughed off for a moment. What luck! Not a ghost, but a deer had scared us half to death. Something was different that night. The fog was swirling wildly in the air, as if a gigantic fan was blowing it around. I have never seen anything like it before. About 2 minutes into the search, I heard a loud groan from where I had performed the Ouija board experiment on a gravestone. It sent shivers up my spine, and I flashed my light in that direction, but I could not see through the fog. The groan came again. It was like nothing I'd ever heard. I tried to remain calm. The place seemed to contort. The paths from tombstone to tombstone lengthened and shortened in a strange way. I told my nephew that I thought we should leave, but he convinced me to stay, so we did. We made our way further in and began hearing the beating of drums. It was a loud, constant beating that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Again, this was something I'd never experienced here. I heard voices in a whisper. They were definitely not those of pranksters, but something else. They carried in the wind, and I felt even greater fear. We'd made one round around the place, and we heard something moving in the bushes in the distance. I told my nephew that I was finished and I felt unsafe here. He agreed, and we made our way back to the entrance. As we headed back, the place began to glow brightly. From this same point, we could see nothing. Wait, I missed something, sorry. How? I do not know. We tested to see if it was actually bright by turning off our flashlights. We could see without them. That was the final straw. We got out of the gate as quickly as we could and began walking down the path. We heard more noises and kept steaming past ahead. About halfway back, we stopped and turned around. The cemetery was glowing brilliantly. From this same point, we could see nothing. It was then that we saw a white figure coming from the cemetery towards us. It seemed to hover through the woods. The thing looked like a cloud, but it was separate from the fog in the graveyard. It looked like a cloud, but it was in the shape of a man or a woman. It came toward us, and we decided not to wait to find out what it wanted. We practically ran out of the place, as we came to the street, we took one last glance. The thing still hovered in the distance. We took off as fast as we could. We considered ourselves professionals of this site, having been there numerous times, and yet we lasted less than 10 minutes that night. That night convinced me something exists out there. I cannot explain. I do not know what it was that I saw, but I do know that it was not a living human. I've been to many ghost sites throughout the United States and even the world, but I've never seen anything comparable to this experience. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery sold me on the fact that ghosts are real. So let me know in the comments below what you thought of that story, and if you have a true ghost story of your own that you wouldn't mind me sharing, you can email it to me at heytherehummingbird@runbox.com. I also have my email down below, so I hope to see you tomorrow night. Please like and subscribe, and until then, happy spooky October.